The antiseptic smell burned my nostrils as I gripped the hospital sheets beneath me. Sweat trickled down my temples, my hair plastered against my forehead in damp tendrils. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, too bright, too harsh, making everything around me appear unnaturally stark. Outside my window, Chicago's skyline sparkled against the night sky, indifferent to my suffering. "Push, Ms. Collins. One more time," the doctor urged, her voice calm but firm. I bit down on my lower lip until I tasted copper, pushing with whatever strength remained in my exhausted body. The contraction tore through me, a white-hot knife slicing from within. I screamed, raw, primal, the sound echoing off the sterile walls. Then, suddenly relief. A tiny cry pierced the room. "It's a girl," the doctor announced, lifting my daughter, for me to see. Tears blurred my vision as they placed her on my chest, her skin still slick, her tiny face scrunched in protest against this cold new world. She was perfect. 10 fingers, 10 toes, a dusting of dark hair that reminded me of him. Victor. My throat constricted at the thought of his name. Victor Moretti. Not my lover, not my boyfriend. Not even really a man I knew, not truly. Just someone who had swept into my life like a hurricane 6 months ago, leaving destruction in his wake before disappearing entirely. "Do you have someone we should call?" the nurse asked gently, adjusting my IV. I hesitated, my finger tracing the delicate curve of my daughter's cheek. I'd been alone for months now, ever since I discovered I was pregnant, and Victor had vanished from my life. No family to speak of, just a few friends who'd been supportive but had their own lives, their own problems. "No," I whispered, then stopped. An idea. Terrible, desperate, possibly dangerous, formed in my mind. "Actually, yes, there is someone." My phone sat on the bedside table. I reached for it with trembling fingers, scrolling through contacts until I found the number I never thought I'd use again. The number he'd given me that night at his restaurant, scrawled on a napkin with a smirk that suggested he knew I'd never call. "Are you sure?" the nurse asked, witnessing my hesitation. "No." I wasn't sure. I wasn't sure of anything anymore, but looking down at my daughter's face, I knew I had to try. For her, she deserved more than I could give her alone. "Yes," I said, more firmly this time. "Could you make the call for me? I'm not sure I can." The nurse nodded, taking the phone from my hand. "What would you like me to say?" I swallowed hard. "Just tell him. Tell him to come to Northwestern Memorial. Tell him." She said, "The baby's yours." My heart hammered in my chest as the nurse stepped outside. Through the partially open door, I heard her voice, low and professional, then silence. Had he hung up? Had he blocked my number? It had been so long. The nurse returned, handing me back my phone with a gentle smile. "He's on his way." The word sent a jolt through me. Victor was coming. Victor Moretti, the man I'd later learn was not just the owner of Elysium, the most exclusive restaurant in Chicago, but one of the most powerful figures in the city's underworld, was coming here, to see me, to see his daughter. What had I done? The next 2 hours passed in a blur of nurses checking vitals, of learning to nurse my daughter, of trying to fix my appearance in a futile attempt to look somewhat presentable. As if Victor would care how I looked after giving birth. As if that would matter to a man like him. I'd met him 6 months ago, working as a waitress at a charity gala. Not my usual gig. I was normally slinging drinks at a dive bar downtown. But the pay was good, and I needed every cent. Victor had watched me all night, his dark eyes following my movements across the ballroom. When I'd accidentally spilled champagne on a guest designer dress, the woman had screamed at me, threatening my job, my livelihood. Then Victor appeared, smoothly intervening, calming the situation with a few murmured words, and what I later realized was the promise of compensation far exceeding the cost of the dress. "You should be more careful," he'd said afterward, his voice deep and accented, the hint of Italy still lingering in his words, despite what I assumed were years in America. "Thank you," I'd replied, my cheeks burning with shame. "I can't afford to lose this job." Something flickered in his eyes then. Interest, calculation. "What's your name?" "Emma. Emma Collins." "Emma." The way he said it made it sound like something precious. "Come to my restaurant tomorrow night. Elysium. Ask for me." I'd gone, of course. Curiosity. And something else. Something I couldn't name. Pulling me there despite my better judgment. That night had been the beginning of a whirlwind. Expensive dinners. Gifts appearing at my apartment. Nights in his penthouse overlooking the lake. Never once did he speak of his business. Of the men who always seemed to hover at the periphery. Of the way conversation stopped when he entered a room. Then, one night, I'd seen something I shouldn't have. A meeting in the back room of Elysium. The flash of a gun. Money changing hands. Victor's face. So different from the one he showed me. Cold, hard, merciless. I'd fled, terrified, only to find him at my apartment door an hour later. "You shouldn't have been there, Emma," he'd said quietly, his calm more frightening than anger would have been. I'd stammered excuses, apologies, promises. He'd simply watched me, those dark eyes unreadable, before stepping forward to brush a strand of hair from my face. "You see too much," he'd murmured. And then he'd kissed me, hungry and possessive, backing me into my apartment, into my bedroom. That night had been different from the others. More intense, almost desperate. In the morning, he was gone. My calls went unanswered. He'd vanished from my life as suddenly as he'd entered it. A week later, I discovered I was pregnant. The memory faded as the hospital room door swung open. It wasn't Victor, just another nurse checking on us. My daughter slept peacefully in the clear bassinet beside my bed, unaware of the storm I might have just invited into our lives. "Ms. Collins," the nurse said gently. "It's almost 3 a.m. You should try to get some rest." I nodded. But sleep was impossible. Every sound in the hallway made me tense, expecting to see him walk through the door. What would he say? Would he believe me? Would he care? Or would he see this as some kind of trap? An attempt to extort money or recognition from a man who valued his privacy, his control, above all else. Just as my eyes began to grow heavy, the atmosphere in the hallway changed. There was a commotion. Hushed, urgent voices, the sound of expensive shoes on linoleum, the unmistakable deference in the hospital staff's tones. My pulse quickened. He was here. The door opened slowly, and there he stood. Victor Moretti. 6 months hadn't changed him. If anything, he looked more powerful, more dangerous than I remembered. Tall and broad-shouldered in a black suit that had probably cost more than my yearly rent. His dark hair slightly disheveled, as if he'd run his fingers through it repeatedly. His face was all sharp angles and shadows in the dim light, his eyes finding mine immediately. Behind him stood 2 men, security undoubtedly, their faces impassive, their stances alert despite the early hour. One remained in the hallway while the other scanned the room quickly before stepping back outside, closing the door behind him, giving us privacy, or trapping me. I wasn't sure which. Victor didn't speak. His gaze moved from my face to the bassinet beside me, lingering there for a long moment. I couldn't read his expression. Shock, disbelief, anger, perhaps all 3. When he finally looked back at me, I shivered at the intensity in his eyes. "Victor," I began, my voice barely above a whisper. How do I know?" he interrupted, his voice controlled, betraying nothing. "How do I know she's mine?" The question stung, though I'd been expecting it. "Look at her," I said simply. He hesitated, then moved closer to the bassinet, looking down at our sleeping daughter. Something shifted in his face, the hardness softening almost imperceptibly as he studied her features. The dark hair, the shape of her nose, the slight olive tone to her skin even just hours after birth, she looked like him, undeniably. "What's her name?" he asked, still not looking at me. "I haven't decided yet," I admitted. I thought maybe you'd want to be part of that decision." Now he turned to me, his expression guarded. "Why did you call me Emma?" The question hung in the air between us. Why had I called him? For money? For support? For some misguided hope that he might suddenly transform into a loving father? A partner? "Because she deserves to know her father," I said finally. The truth simple and devastating. "And because I've been alone for 6 months. Ever since you disappeared. His jaw tightened. I didn't disappear. I protected you. Protected me? Anger flared unexpectedly, hot and bright in my chest. By abandoning me? By ignoring my calls when I found out I was pregnant with your child? You don't understand what my life is, he said, his voice dropping lower. What it would mean for you to be part of it. For her to be part of it. Then explain it to me, I challenged, sitting up straighter despite the pain still radiating through my body, because all I know is that the man who claimed to care about me vanished the moment I saw something I wasn't supposed to see. Victor's eyes darkened dangerously. It was never about what you saw, it was about who saw you. The words sent a chill down my spine. What do you mean? He stepped closer, looming over my hospital bed. The people I deal with, Emma, they notice things. They notice when someone becomes important to me. They use it. His voice hardened. I left to keep you safe. I wanted to believe him. Part of me did. But the months of silence, of wondering, of facing this pregnancy alone, they had hardened something in me too. And now? I asked, my voice steadier than I felt. Now that she's here? Are you going to disappear again? Victor's gaze returned to our daughter, something possessive flashing in his eyes. No, he said finally, the word sounding like a vow. No, I'm not going to disappear. Before I could respond, the baby stirred, her tiny face scrunching up before releasing a high-pitched cry. Victor stiffened, taking a half step back as if the sound had physically pushed him. Instinctively, I reached for her, lifting her carefully from the bassinet and cradling her against my chest. Shh, I soothed, rocking gently. It's okay, you're okay. I felt Victor watching us, his gaze almost tangible on my skin. When I looked up, the expression on his face startled me, a mixture of wonder and fear and something else, something possessive and fierce. She needs a name, he said abruptly. I was thinking Sophia, I offered cautiously. Sophia Rose Collins. Sophia Rose Moretti, he corrected immediately, his tone brooking no argument. The presumption stunned me into silence. He continued, his voice softer but no less determined. You'll both come home with me, when you're released. I have a house in Lincoln Park, safe, private, you'll want for nothing. It wasn't a request. The realization settled over me like a heavy cloak. Victor wasn't asking, he was telling. This was his world. One of commands and expectations, not questions and choices. I have my own apartment, I protested weakly. His smile was brief, humorless. A fifth-floor walk-up in Logan Square with bars on the windows and locks that could be picked by a child. No, not for my daughter, not for you. The possessiveness in his voice should have frightened me. Instead, it sent a different kind of shiver through me. The memory of how it had felt to be the focus of Victor Moretti's attention, of his desire. The memory of feeling, however briefly, protected rather than alone. Sophia quieted against my chest, her tiny hand curling around my finger with surprising strength. I looked down at her, this miracle who had come from the brief, intense connection between Victor and me, and knew that my choices were no longer just about myself, they were about her. About what kind of life she would have, about whether her father would be in it. We should talk about this, I said finally. About what it means, about what you do. Victor's expression hardened again. There are things you don't need to know, Emma. For your safety, for hers. If I'm going to be in your life, if she's going to be in your life, I need to understand what that means. He was silent for a long moment, considering. Then he reached out, his fingers brushing Sophia's dark hair with a gentleness that surprised me. Okay, he conceded, we'll talk. But not here. Not now. As if on cue, there was a sharp knock at the door. Victor's bodyguard poked his head in. Boss, we need to move. Hospital security is asking questions. Victor nodded, then turned back to me. I'll have my men stationed outside your door. No one comes in without my approval. I'll be back in the morning. He hesitated, then added, We have a lot to discuss. He leaned down, pressing a brief, unexpected kiss to my forehead, then to Sophia's. The gesture was surprisingly tender from a man whose life I was beginning to realize was anything but. As he straightened, His expression changed, becoming the mask I remembered from that night at Elysium, controlled, dangerous, impenetrable. "She's beautiful," he said quietly, like her mother. Then he was gone, the door closing behind him with a soft click that somehow seemed to seal my fate. I looked down at Sophia, still clutching my finger, still oblivious to the complicated world she'd been born into. "What have I done?" I whispered to her. "What have I done to us both?" But as I said the words, a strange calm settled over me. For the first time in months, I wasn't alone. For better or worse, Victor Moretti was back in my life. And something told me that this time, he had no intention of letting us go. Morning came with the harsh reality of hospital routines, nurses checking vitals, doctors making rounds, the constant beeping of monitors from neighboring rooms. I'd barely slept, my mind racing with thoughts of Victor, of his promises, of the life that might be waiting for Sophia and me beyond these sterile walls. True to his word, 2 men in dark suits had remained stationed outside my door all night. I'd caught glimpses of them when nurses entered, one tall and broad with a shaved head, the other leaner with watchful eyes that missed nothing. They never spoke, never acknowledged me, but their presence was a constant reminder of whose world I'd just stepped into. Sophia slept peacefully in the bassinet beside me, untroubled by the weight of her parentage. I envied her that innocence. When I looked at her tiny face, I saw Victor. The shape of her nose, the fullness of her lips, the olive undertone to her skin. Would she have his temperament too? His intensity? His capacity for what? I still didn't know the full extent of what Victor did, who he truly was. Only whispers and suspicions, and that one glimpse of a side of him that had sent me running. The door opened without a knock, and my breath caught. But it wasn't Victor. Just a nurse with breakfast and medication. "You have quite the security detail," she commented, setting a tray on the rolling table. "Someone important?" I forced a smile. "Just cautious family." She raised an eyebrow but didn't push. "The pediatrician will be by in an hour. If all looks good, you both might be discharged this afternoon." The thought sent anxiety spiraling through me. Discharge meant decisions. Meant facing Victor's expectations that we would simply go home with him, become part of his world. A world I knew almost nothing about. "Thank you," I managed, reaching for the cup of lukewarm tea on the tray. The nurse hesitated at the door. "There's, a delivery for you at the nurse's station. Several, actually. Should I bring them in?" Confused, I nodded. She returned minutes later, arms laden with gift bags and boxes, followed by another nurse similarly burdened. They arranged them around the room, on the windowsill, the visitor's chair, the floor by the wall, until my sterile hospital room resembled a luxury boutique. "These came first thing this morning," the nurse explained, handing me a small envelope. With trembling fingers, I opened it, recognizing the heavy cream cardstock before I even read the message written in elegant script. For Sophia and her mother, the first of many. V. I looked at the array of packages, designer boutique logos, high-end department store bags, boxes from shops whose names I could barely pronounce. "Should we open them?" the nurse asked, curiosity evident in her voice. Wordlessly, I nodded. Together we unwrapped the gifts, tiny clothes in soft pastels and creams, cashmere blankets, silver rattles and brush sets, stuffed animals of the highest quality. For me, there were silk pajamas, a leather weekend bag already packed with toiletries, a cashmere robe and slippers. "Someone really wants to take care of you," the nurse murmured, fingering the edge of a blanket that probably cost more than she made in a week. If only it were that simple. Victor didn't want to take care of us. He wanted to possess us. The gifts weren't generosity, they were a statement, a claiming. "There's more," she added, handing me another envelope that had been nestled in one of the bags. Inside was a key card in a leather holder embossed with the logo of one of Chicago's most exclusive hotels. A note accompanied it. "Until the house is ready. 3 days. The presidential suite. My people will take you there, V." The presumption stole my breath. No discussion, no options. Just Victor, arranging my life, our lives, as he saw fit. The old Emma might have bristled, might have handed it all back. insisted on her independence. But the old Emma hadn't been responsible for a newborn. Hadn't been exhausted and alone and terrified of the future. The nurses eventually left, and I was alone again with Sophia and the mountain of expensive gifts. I picked up my phone, scrolling through contacts, friends I could call, people who might help me navigate this situation. But who would understand? Who would believe me if I told them that Victor Moretti, rumored to control half the city's underground economy, had claimed us as his own? A soft knock interrupted my thoughts. The door opened to reveal a woman I'd never seen before. Tall, elegant, somewhere in her 40s, with sharp eyes that assessed me in one quick glance. "Ms. Collins," she said, her voice clipped and professional. "I'm Diana Russo, Mr. Moretti's assistant." She didn't offer a hand to shake, just entered the room and closed the door behind her. "I've been instructed to help with your discharge and transfer to the peninsula." "Where's Victor?" I asked, immediately hating how small my voice sounded. "Mr. Moretti is handling some business matters. He'll join you this evening." Her eyes swept over the gifts, satisfaction flickering across her face. "I see the packages arrived. Good. I've also taken the liberty of bringing you something to wear home." She placed a shopping bag on the bed. Inside was a simple but clearly expensive wrap dress and soft jersey, a nursing bra, underwear with the tags still on, and ballet flats, all in my size. The thought of Victor instructing this woman on my measurements made heat rise to my cheeks. "The doctor has signed your discharge papers," Diana continued. "A pediatrician from Chicago Children's will meet us at the hotel for Sophia's follow-up. Private entrance, private elevator. Security has been arranged. The hotel staff has been briefed." My head spun with the efficiency of it all, the way my life was being rearranged without my input. "Don't I get a say in any of this?" Diana's expression softened slightly. "Mr. Moretti is protective of what's his, especially now." She glanced meaningfully at Sophia. "It's not my place to explain, but there are reasons for these precautions." "What reasons? What aren't you telling me?" She straightened her already impeccable posture. "Mr. Moretti will explain everything tonight. In the meantime, my job is to ensure you and Sophia arrive safely at the peninsula. Now, would you like help getting dressed?" An hour later, I was seated in a wheelchair, hospital policy for new mothers, with Sophia bundled in my arms, being wheeled toward the private exit. Diana walked beside us, occasionally checking her phone or speaking quietly into a Bluetooth earpiece. Ahead and behind us walked Victor's men, their eyes constantly scanning, hands never far from the bulges beneath their jackets that I now recognized as weapons. "Is all this really necessary?" I whispered to Diana, uncomfortable with the attention we were drawing. "Yes," she replied simply, not bothering to elaborate. Outside, a black Suburban with tinted windows waited, engine running. One of the security men opened the door, revealing a car seat already installed. Top of the line, of course. Diana helped transfer Sophia into it, showing me how the straps worked, how to adjust the headrest for a newborn. "Mr. Moretti had it installed this morning," she explained. "He insisted on the highest safety rating." The image of Victor Moretti researching car seats was so incongruous I almost laughed. Instead, I settled into the seat beside Sophia, watching as Diana took the front passenger seat, and the security men positioned themselves. One driving, one in the third row, constantly vigilant. As we pulled away from the hospital, a strange mixture of fear and relief washed over me. Fear of what lay ahead, of the world I was entering, relief at not being alone anymore, at having resources, protection. The contradiction twisted in my chest, making it hard to breathe. The drive to the peninsula took less than 20 minutes. We bypassed the main entrance, pulling instead into a discreet service area. More of Victor's men waited there, creating a human corridor from the car to a private elevator. Diana led the way, holding doors, pressing buttons, all while maintaining a running commentary on the security features of the hotel, the staff who had been vetted, the protocols in place. The presidential suite took up half of the top floor, offering panoramic views of the city through floor-to-ceiling windows. It was larger than my entire apartment, decorated in muted creams and golds, fresh flowers on every surface. In the master bedroom, a bassinet had been set up beside the king-sized bed, not a hotel provision, but a custom piece that matched the dark wood of the crib. waiting in the adjoining room that had been hastily converted to a nursery. "The refrigerator is stocked," Diana explained, leading me through the suite. "Chef will send up meals according to the schedule. The doctor will arrive at 2. Security is positioned in the hall, the stairwell, and the service elevator. No one enters without clearance." She handed me a phone. Brand new, already activated. "This has direct lines to security, to me, and to Mr. Moretti. Use it if you need anything." I stood in the middle of the opulent living room, Sophia asleep in my arms, feeling utterly out of place. "When will Victor be here?" 7 o'clock, Diana replied, checking her watch. "He asked that you and Sophia be ready for dinner. It will be served here, of course." With that, she was gone, leaving me alone in the most luxurious cage I could imagine. I wandered from room to room, taking in the details, the monogrammed towels in the marble bathroom, the walk-in closet already filled with clothes in my size, the fully equipped nursery with more baby items than I could have afforded in a year. Sophia woke hungry, and I settled into a plush armchair to feed her, looking out at the city below. Somewhere out there was my apartment, my life, modest but mine. A life I had built on my own after leaving my alcoholic mother's home at 18, putting myself through community college, working multiple jobs to make ends meet. I had been proud of that independence, that self-sufficiency. Now I sat in a hotel suite that cost more per night than I made in a month, wearing clothes chosen for me, surrounded by security I hadn't asked for, waiting for a man who had arranged my life without consulting me. A man who, despite everything, still made my heart race when I thought of him. The afternoon passed in a haze of newborn care and restless anxiety. The pediatrician came and went, pronouncing Sophia perfectly healthy. A massage therapist arrived to help with my postpartum recovery, another of Victor's arrangements. Food appeared at regular intervals, each dish more exquisite than the last. At 6, I showered and dressed in one of the outfits that had mysteriously appeared in the closet. A simple black dress that somehow fit perfectly, accommodating my postpartum body without emphasizing it. I applied minimal makeup, more as armor than adornment, and arranged my hair as best I could. Sophia was bathed, changed, and fed, sleeping peacefully in the bassinet beside the bed where I would sleep. Where Victor expected to sleep. The thought sent a different kind of nervousness through me. At precisely 7, there was a knock at the door. I opened it to find Victor, alone except for the ever-present security in the hallway. He wore another impeccable suit, dark blue this time, his hair perfectly styled, his face freshly shaved. He looked like he belonged in this world of luxury and privilege. I felt like an imposter. "Emma," he said, his voice sending an unwanted shiver down my spine. His eyes traveled over me, taking in the dress, the bare feet, the nervousness I couldn't quite hide. "You look beautiful. Thank you for—" I gestured vaguely at the suite, unsure how to express gratitude for something I hadn't asked for. "It's nothing," he replied, stepping past me into the suite. His presence immediately seemed to fill the space, making it smaller, more intimate. "Where is she?" "Sleeping," I said, leading him to the bedroom. Victor approached the bassinet silently, looking down at Sophia with an expression I couldn't decipher. In the soft light, his face seemed younger, less guarded. He reached down, his large hand hovering above her for a moment before gently, so gently, touching her cheek with one finger. "She's so small," he murmured, more to himself than to me. "She's perfect," I replied automatically. He looked up at me then, something vulnerable flickering across his face before disappearing behind the mask. "Yes, she is." He straightened, composing himself. "Are you hungry?" Diana arranged dinner. I nodded, following him back to the dining area where a table had been set with fine china and crystal, a bottle of wine chilling in an ice bucket. It felt like a bizarre date, new parents sharing an intimate dinner while their newborn slept nearby, surrounded by luxury and unspoken secrets. Victor pulled out my chair, waiting until I was seated before taking his own place. He poured water for me, wine for himself, his movements precise, controlled. "You must have questions," he said finally, after the silence had stretched too long. "A few," I replied dryly. "Like why you disappeared for 6 months. Why I'm suddenly surrounded by security. Why you've arranged my life without asking what I want. Take your pick. He sipped his wine, considering me over the rim of the glass. Would you believe me if I said it was all to protect you? No, I said honestly. Not without an explanation. Victor set down his glass, leaning forward slightly. What do you know about me, Emma? Really know? I hesitated, uncertain how much to admit. I know you own Elysium. I know you're wealthy. I know there are rumors about how you made that wealth. I swallowed hard. I know what I saw that night. What you think you saw, he corrected, his voice hardening slightly. I saw enough, I countered. Guns, money, men who looked like they'd kill without hesitation. Like the men currently guarding our door. Victor was silent for a long moment, his dark eyes studying me, as if deciding how much truth I could handle. Finally, he spoke, his voice low and measured. My family has interests in many businesses throughout Chicago, some legitimate, some less so. I inherited those interests when my father died 5 years ago. With them came enemies, rivals, complications. He paused. When you and I met, I broke my own rules. I allowed myself to want something, someone, outside that world. So what happened? Why did you leave? His jaw tightened. Because someone noticed. Someone saw us together at Elysium. Saw the way I looked at you. The Costello family, our rivals for generations, they have a particular approach to warfare. They don't target their enemies directly. They target what their enemies love. A chill ran down my spine. And they targeted me? They would have, Victor said, his voice cold with certainty. I received information, photos of you leaving your apartment, going to work, detailed reports of your routine, a warning, a threat. So you just disappeared, without a word? I distanced myself, made it clear you meant nothing to me. Had people spread the word that you were just temporary entertainment? The words clearly cost him, his face tightening. I thought it would protect you. And now? Now that I've called you? Now that everyone knows about Sophia? Victor's expression darkened. Now I have to protect you differently. Now you become untouchable. Now everyone knows that to touch you, either of you, is to die. The bluntness of his statement shocked me, though it shouldn't have. This was who he was. A man who dealt in absolutes, in power, in violence when necessary. Is that supposed to comfort me? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. It's supposed to be the truth, he replied. You wanted to know why the security, why the arrangements, that's why. Because from the moment you called me, from the moment I saw our daughter, there was no more pretending you didn't matter. There was only making sure no one could use you against me. The server arrived with our first course, interrupting the tension. We ate in silence for several minutes, the food exquisite but tasting like ash in my mouth as I processed Victor's words. So what happens now? I finally asked. We stay in this hotel forever, surrounded by your men. The corner of Victor's mouth lifted slightly. 3 days, until the house is ready. What house? My house in Lincoln Park. It's being renovated. Security systems, nursery, everything you and Sophia will need. Again, the presumption. And if I don't want that? If I want my own place, my own life? Victor set down his fork, his expression hardening. That's not an option. Excuse me? It's not safe, Emma. Not for you. Not for her. With who I am, what I control. He leaned forward, his voice intense. The Costellos will be looking for weaknesses now more than ever. There are others who would use you to get to me. I won't risk it. I won't risk you. So I'm just supposed to give up my life, my independence, because you've decided. Because it's necessary, he corrected. Because Sophia deserves to be safe, to have both her parents. Because I can give you both a life you never dreamed of. In a gilded cage, I said bitterly. Victor's eyes flashed. Would you prefer poverty? Struggling to make rent? Working multiple jobs while Sophia is raised by strangers in daycare? Is your pride worth her future? The words struck like physical blows. Because he was right. My options were limited. A single mother with no family support. Minimal savings. A waitressing job that barely covered my rent. What kind of life could I give Sophia on my own? You don't fight fair, I whispered. I don't fight to be fair, Victor replied. his voice softening slightly. I fight to win. Always. A cry from the bedroom interrupted us. Sophia, awake and hungry again. I rose automatically, but Victor was already on his feet. "May I?" he asked, a strange hesitancy in his voice. Surprised, I nodded, following him to the bedroom where he approached the bassinet with unexpected caution. He looked to me for guidance, and I showed him how to lift her, supporting her head. The sight of Sophia, tiny and perfect, cradled against Victor's broad chest, was disarming. This dangerous man, holding our daughter with such gentle care, his expression transformed by something like awe. "She needs to eat," I said softly. Victor nodded, reluctantly handing her back to me. I settled into a chair, adjusting my dress for nursing, suddenly self-conscious under his watchful gaze. But he didn't look away, just watched as our daughter nursed, his expression unreadable. "I've never felt like this," he admitted suddenly, his voice rough with emotion, like I would burn the world down to keep someone safe. The raw honesty in his voice touched something in me, a reminder of the man I'd glimpsed beneath the dangerous exterior during our brief time together, the man who had looked at me like I was precious, who had listened when I spoke of my dreams, who had held me through the night as if afraid I might disappear. "I want to trust you, Victor," I said quietly. "But you have to understand, you're asking me to give up everything. To step into a world I know nothing about. To put Sophia's future in your hands. Not just my hands," he corrected, kneeling beside the chair to be at eye level with me. "Ours. Together." He reached out, tucking a strand of hair behind my ear, his fingers lingering on my cheek. "I never stopped thinking about you, Emma. Even when I stayed away. Even when I thought it was the right thing to do." I wanted to lean into his touch, to believe him, but 6 months of silence, of facing pregnancy alone, had built walls I wasn't sure I could tear down so easily. "I need time," I said finally. "Time to adjust. Time to decide if this, whatever this is what I want for Sophia, for myself." Victor's expression tightened, clearly unused to not getting his immediate way. But he nodded slowly. "Time. But not distance. Not now. You stay under my protection, non-negotiable." It wasn't independence, but it was a concession, however small. I nodded, adjusting Sophia as she finished nursing. "She needs to be burped," I explained. Without hesitation, Victor held out his hands. "Show me." And so I did, guiding him through the process, watching as he awkwardly but determinedly patted our daughter's back, his face a mixture of concentration and wonder when she released a tiny burp against his shoulder. In that moment, watching him with Sophia, I could almost imagine a future where this worked, where Victor's dangerous world and my simple one could merge into something new, something that might, against all odds, give our daughter the family neither of us had known. But as Sophia drifted back to sleep in her father's arms, I couldn't silence the voice in the back of my mind that whispered warnings. About the cost of security, about the price of protection, about what it meant to belong to a man like Victor Moretti. 3 days in the presidential suite passed like a dream, or perhaps a beautiful delusion. Victor came and went, his presence always announced by a flurry of activity among the security team, his arrivals bringing an intensity to the air that left me breathless. He was learning to be a father in small, determined steps, watching intently as I demonstrated how to change diapers, how to swaddle, how to bathe Sophia's delicate body. His large hands I'd seen clench in anger, now moved with exquisite gentleness over our daughter's tiny form. At night, he slept beside me in the massive bed, careful not to touch me, respecting the physical and emotional distance I'd requested. But I felt his presence acutely, his warmth, his scent, the sound of his breathing. Sometimes I'd wake to find him already awake, watching Sophia in her bassinet with an expression of fierce protection that made my heart twist. We talked, more than we ever had during our whirlwind romance 6 months ago. He told me about growing up as the son of Antonio Moretti, about the expectations placed on him from childhood, about taking over the family's businesses at 27 when his father was killed. He never explicitly confirmed what those businesses entailed, dancing around the details with practiced ease. But the picture became clearer with each conversation. The Moretti family controlled significant portions of Chicago's underground economy: gambling, protection, smuggling, money laundering through legitimate businesses like Elysium. They had politicians in their pockets, cops on their payroll. And they had enemies, chief among them the Costello family, whose territory bordered Moretti Holdings on the west side. There's been peace, mostly, for the past 2 years, Victor explained on our last night in the hotel, as we sat on the balcony overlooking the city lights, Sophia asleep inside. A negotiated arrangement after too much bloodshed on both sides. But it's fragile. Carlo Costello is old, sick. His son Marco is unpredictable, hungry for more territory. And that's why you're worried? About Sophia and me? Victor's jaw tightened. Marco has a reputation for cruelty, for sending messages through family members of his rivals. When Carlo dies, he left the thought unfinished, but his meaning was clear. So we're targets, I whispered, the reality of our situation settling cold and heavy in my stomach. No, Victor said firmly, reaching for my hand across the table. You're protected. There's a difference. His thumb traced circles on my palm, the simple touch sending warmth up my arm. Tomorrow we move to the house, you'll see. I've thought of everything. The house, as it turned out, was not just a house, but an estate. A sprawling stone mansion set back from the street, surrounded by high walls topped with discreet but unmistakable security measures. We arrived in a convoy of black SUVs, passing through gates that opened automatically and closed immediately behind us. Men in suits patrolled the perimeter, while others, less obvious but no less vigilant, maintained positions throughout the manicured grounds. I trailed off as Victor led me into a soaring entryway with marble floors and a crystal chandelier. Home, he finished for me, his hand warm on the small of my back. Let me show you. The tour took nearly an hour. 6 bedrooms, 7 bathrooms, formal and informal living areas, a chef's kitchen where an actual chef was already preparing lunch, a library, a home theater, a pool house. Every room was immaculate, decorated in a style that spoke of old money and refined taste, likely the work of professional designers rather than personal choices. Sophia's nursery adjoined the master suite, a fairy tale room in soft pinks and creams, with a custom crib, a hand-painted mural of an Italian countryside on one wall, and enough baby clothes and toys to outfit a small army of infants. This is too much, Victor, I murmured, overwhelmed by the opulence, by the reality of what my life had suddenly become. It's what she deserves, he replied simply. What you deserve. My room, our room, was a study in luxury. A king-sized bed dominated the space, facing floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the garden, a sitting area with plush chairs, a fireplace, a bathroom larger than my entire apartment with a soaking tub and separate shower. The closet was already filled with clothes in my size, from casual to formal, all bearing designer labels I'd only seen in magazines. I had Diana select everything, Victor explained, watching my face as I took it all in. If you don't like something, it can be changed. Everything can be changed, except the fundamental truth of our situation, that I was now living in Victor Moretti's world, subject to his protection, his rules, his expectations. That first week in the house established patterns that would define our new life together. Victor left each morning, dressed in his impeccable suits, to attend to his businesses. He returned each evening, sometimes for dinner, sometimes later, always making his way immediately to Sophia, lifting her into his arms with a gentleness that still surprised me. He spoke to her in Italian, soft words I couldn't understand but recognized as endearments from his tone. We settled into a strange domesticity. Me, caring for our daughter in surroundings more luxurious than I'd ever imagined. Victor, moving between his dangerous world and ours with a compartmentalization I couldn't fathom. Us, sharing meals, conversations, the tentative rebuilding of whatever had flared between us 6 months ago. There were staff, a housekeeper, the chef, groundskeepers, all of whom treated me with a deference that made me uncomfortable. And there were Victor's men, always present, always watchful. Dominic, the head of security, a former Special Forces soldier with a scar across his left cheek and eyes that missed nothing. Marco and Anthony, brothers who seemed to communicate without speaking, always positioned at entrance points. Elena, the only woman on the security team, beautiful and deadly, who shadowed me whenever I left the house. Because I did leave the house, despite Victor's initial reluctance. I insisted on it, refusing to be completely confined, even in a gilded cage. Short trips at first, walks around the neighborhood with Sophia in her stroller, Elena and at least one of the men always within arm's reach. Later, visits to parks, to baby-friendly cafes, to a mommy and me class that raised eyebrows when I arrived with a security detail, but quickly normalized as the other mothers recognized the benefits of having trained guards watching all our children. Victor insisted on driving me himself to my 6-week postpartum checkup, waiting in the private room the entire time, his presence making my doctor visibly nervous. When she cleared me for all activities, his eyes met mine across the room, dark with a meaning that sent heat rushing to my cheeks. But he didn't push, didn't presume. He continued to sleep beside me each night, close but not touching unless I initiated contact. And sometimes I did, a hand on his arm during conversation. A brief touch on his shoulder when passing his chair. Small tests of the electricity that still hummed between us, of my own readiness to move beyond the hurt of his abandonment, of my willingness to truly join our lives together. It was a Tuesday evening, nearly 7 weeks after Sophia's birth, when everything shifted. Victor had been tense all day, canceling meetings, working from his home office, checking security protocols with Dominic repeatedly. He wouldn't tell me why, brushing off my questions with reassurances that everything was fine, that it was just business. I was in the nursery, singing softly to Sophia as I rocked her to sleep, when I heard raised voices from downstairs. Victor's, sharp with anger. Dominic's, urgent and low. The sound of rapid footsteps on the stairs. Then Victor was in the doorway, his face hard as granite. "Take Sophia to the safe room," he ordered, already crossing to the closet, opening a hidden panel I hadn't known existed, revealing a keypad. "What? Victor, what's happening?" Panic rose in my throat as I clutched Sophia closer. "Now, Emma," he snapped, punching in a code. The back wall of the closet slid open, revealing a reinforced door. "Dominic will stay with you. Do not come out until I come for you, no matter what you hear." "You're scaring me," I whispered. His expression softened momentarily as he crossed back to us, pressing a fierce kiss to Sophia's head, then to my lips. Brief, but desperate. "I need to know you're safe, both of you. Please." Dominic appeared in the doorway, weapon drawn but held low. "They're at the gates, boss." Victor nodded, all softness vanishing from his face. "Get them inside. Lock it down." To me, he added, "Go with Dominic. Trust no one else, not even my men." The safe room was behind the reinforced door, a space about 15 feet square, with concrete walls, no windows, a separate ventilation system. A surveillance monitor showed feeds from cameras throughout the house and grounds. A small bathroom, a mini fridge stocked with water and formula, a crib, a couch that probably converted to a bed. It was prepared for exactly this scenario, a siege. "What's happening?" I demanded as Dominic secured the door behind us, the heavy bolt sliding into place with a sound of finality. "Marco Costello," he replied grimly, checking the monitor feeds. "Carlo died this morning. Marco's making his move." His move? What does that mean? But even as I asked, I saw the answer on the screens. Men in black, armed, moving across the grounds, Victor's security engaging them. Gunfire, silent on the monitors but unmistakable. "Jesus Christ," I breathed, clutching Sophia tighter as she began to fuss, sensing my distress. "Boss has been expecting this," Dominic said, his voice professionally detached. "We're prepared." I stared at him in horror. Prepared? There's a gunfight happening on the lawn. He didn't respond, just continued to watch the monitors, occasionally speaking into a comm unit attached to his ear. I couldn't tear my eyes from the screens, watching as Victor's men engaged the intruders with a cold efficiency that spoke of professional training. Victor himself moved through the house, armed, directing his people, his face a mask of deadly focus I'd never seen before. Sophia's cries grew louder. Automatically, I began to rock her, to soothe her, my body going through the motions, while my mind struggled to process what was happening. This was Victor's world. The reality behind the luxury, the security, the careful half-truths, violence, death. War. The firefight lasted less than 20 minutes. When it was over, dark shapes lay unmoving on the once immaculate lawn. Victor's men moved methodically through the house and grounds, securing the scene. On one monitor, I watched Victor speaking into a phone, his expression cold, his free hand clenched at his side. "Is it over?" I asked Dominic, my voice hollow. "For now," he replied, still watching the screens. "We need to wait for the all clear." It came 30 minutes later, Victor's voice through the comm in Dominic's ear. He entered a code on a panel inside the safe room, and the heavy door unlocked with a hiss of pressure. Victor stood on the other side, his suit jacket gone, his white shirt spattered with something dark that made my stomach turn. There was a cut above his eye, already swelling, and his knuckles were raw and bloody. But he was alive, whole, his eyes finding mine with an intensity that stole my breath. "It's clear," he said simply. "You're safe." I moved toward him, Sophia still in my arms, relief and anger and fear churning inside me. "What the hell was that, Victor? People are dead on our lawn." His jaw tightened. "Not our lawn anymore. We're leaving. Now. Pack only what Sophia needs for the next few days." "Leaving? To go where?" "The lake house. It's secure. Remote. Victor." His voice cut through my protest, hard as steel. "Marco Costello just tried to kill me in my own home. He tried to reach you, to reach our daughter. This is not a discussion. We leave in 10 minutes. Dominic will help you pack." The drive to the lake house took 2 hours, a tense journey in a convoy of armored SUVs. Sophia asleep in her car seat between us. Victor spent most of it on the phone, speaking in terse sentences, occasionally lapsing into Italian when the conversation grew heated. I caught fragments: names, locations, instructions for cleaning up the mess at the house, security protocols for various properties and businesses. This was the man I'd glimpsed that night at Elysium. The man who commanded an empire built on violence and fear. The man who had enemies willing to storm his home with automatic weapons. The father of my child. The lake house turned out to be a misnomer. It was a compound on 20 acres of private shoreline an hour outside the city. The main house was smaller than the mansion in Lincoln Park, but still impressive. Modern and angular with walls of glass overlooking Lake Michigan. Separate guest houses, a boathouse, a helicopter pad, all surrounded by state-of-the-art security. "We'll be safe here," Victor said as we entered, Sophia still asleep in my arms. He looked exhausted, the cut above his eye now purple and swollen, his shoulders tight with tension. "Marco won't find us. Not right away." "And then what?" I asked, my voice breaking. "Another shootout? More men with guns coming for us? Is this how we're going to live, Victor? Running from house to house, hiding in safe rooms, surrounded by death?" He stared at me for a long moment, something shifting in his expression. Not softening exactly, but opening, revealing the weight he carried, the calculations constantly running behind his eyes. "No," he said finally. "This ends. Tonight." "What does that mean?" I demanded, fear clutching at my throat. Victor stepped closer, his hand gentle as it brushed Sophia's cheek. "It means I'm going to make sure Marco Costello never threatens my family again." The implication was clear, horrifying. "You're going to kill him." It wasn't a question, but he answered anyway, his voice matter of fact. "Yes." I stepped back, shaking my head. I can't be part of this, Victor. I can't raise our daughter in this world." Pain flashed across his face, quickly masked. "This is who I am, Emma. This is the world I live in, the world I was born into, just like Sophia." "No," I said firmly, finding strength I didn't know I possessed. "Sophia wasn't born into this world. She was born into mine, into a hospital with doctors and nurses, not men with guns and safe rooms. I called you because she deserves to know her father, but not this." "And what would you have me do?" he demanded, anger finally breaking through his control. "Walk away from everything? Pretend the Costellos won't hunt us down wherever we go? Pretend I can be something I'm not?" "I don't know," I cried, loud enough that Sophia stirred against my chest. Lowering my voice, I continued. "I don't know what the answer is. I just know I can't stand in this house, holding our daughter, while you go out to commit murder. I can't." Victor's face hardened, all vulnerability disappearing behind the mask of the man his enemies feared. Then what do you suggest, Emma? Because Marco Costello will not stop. He will hunt us, hunt Sophia, until one of us is dead. Those are the rules of this world. Then change the rules, I whispered. You have power, Victor, resources. There has to be another way. He laughed, a harsh sound without humor. Another way? What? Call the police? Turn state's evidence? Put my family in witness protection where Marco's money would find us in a week? I don't know, I repeated, exhaustion and fear making my voice crack. I just know I can't do this, not like this. Victor stared at me for a long moment, his dark eyes unreadable. Then he turned away, pulling out his phone. Dominic will stay with you. The house is secure. Don't leave for any reason. And where are you going? He paused at the door, not looking back. To fix this, my way, and then he was gone, leaving me alone with our sleeping daughter and the knowledge that somewhere out in the night, more blood would be spilled in our name. The next few hours were the longest of my life. I put Sophia in the portable crib that had been set up in the master bedroom, watching her sleep, envying her peace, her obliviousness to the violence swirling around us. Dominic positioned himself outside the bedroom door, silent, vigilant, refusing to answer my questions about what Victor was doing, where he had gone. I tried to sleep but couldn't, my mind racing with terrible possibilities. Victor killed. Victor killing. Us running forever, looking over our shoulders, raising Sophia in a world of bodyguards and safe rooms and midnight escapes. Or worse, Victor gone, and Marco Costello finding us anyway, using us to send his message. It was nearly dawn when I heard the helicopter approaching. Dominic tensed, hand moving to his weapon, then relaxed as a voice came through his earpiece. It's the boss, he confirmed, the first words he'd spoken in hours. I moved to the window, watching as the helicopter landed on the pad near the shore, its blades whipping the surface of the lake into white-capped waves. Victor emerged, alone, his suit still immaculate despite the night's activities. He moved with purpose toward the house, his face set in lines of exhaustion, but something else too. Resolution. He entered the bedroom minutes later, his eyes finding mine across the space between us. It's done, he said simply. Marco? I asked, my voice barely audible. Victor's expression didn't change. Not dead, contained. There's a difference. What does that mean? He moved to the crib, looking down at Sophia, his hand gripping the rail with white-knuckled intensity. It means I made him an offer he couldn't refuse. Territory, concessions, peace. Relief washed through me, followed quickly by suspicion. Just like that? After he tried to kill you? To reach us? Not just like that, Victor said, his voice hardening. There were demonstrations of what would happen if he broke the agreement. Examples made. He turned to face me, his eyes shadowed with the night's work. But yes, we have peace, for now. At what cost? I whispered. A cost I was willing to pay, he replied. For Sophia. For you. He looked different in that moment, older somehow. The weight of his world etched more deeply into the lines of his face. This was a man who had made compromises, who had weighed options and chosen the path he could live with, even if it wasn't the path of least bloodshed. Come here, he said softly, holding out his hand. I hesitated, then crossed the room to him. He smelled of smoke and night air and something metallic I didn't want to identify. His hand, when it took mine, was ice cold. I won't pretend to be something I'm not, Emma, he said, his voice low and intense. I'm not a good man. I've done things, terrible things, to protect what's mine, to hold what my father built, what his father built before him. But tonight, I chose a different path, because of you, because of her. He glanced at Sophia, sleeping peacefully in her crib. I chose the path that gives us a chance at something resembling normal. As normal as it can be with who I am. What does that mean? For us? Victor's hand tightened on mine. It means we can go back to the house, once it's cleaned up. It means Sophia can grow up without looking over her shoulder every minute. It means I can be there for her first steps, her first words, her first day of school. without wondering if today's the day Marco Costello sends his men for me. He paused, his eyes searching mine. It means I can try to be the man you need me to be. Not perfect, not completely changed, but trying. It wasn't a fairy tale ending. It wasn't a complete transformation. Victor was still who he was, a man with blood on his hands, with businesses that operated in shadows, with enemies who might one day decide peace wasn't profitable. But he had chosen compromise over vengeance, had chosen us over the absolute victory his pride might have demanded. Was it enough? Could I raise our daughter with this man, knowing what he was capable of, what he had done? Could I build a life with him, knowing that the peace he'd brokered tonight might someday shatter? I didn't have the answers, not yet. But as the sun rose over Lake Michigan, painting the water in shades of gold and pink, I allowed myself to lean into Victor's embrace, to rest my head against his chest, and listen to the steady beating of his heart. Tomorrow would bring decisions, compromises, the messy work of figuring out how to blend our worlds together. But for now, in this moment, there was just us. Victor, me, and Sophia, safe in the stillness after the storm. "We'll figure it out," I murmured against his shirt, feeling his arms tighten around me in response. One day at a time, and for the first time since that night in the hospital when I'd made the call that changed everything, I believed it might actually be possible. 6 months passed in a blur of milestones and adjustments. Sophia learned to roll over, to sit up, to babble consonants that might someday become words. I learned to navigate Victor's world, a complex ecosystem of legitimate businesses, shadowy enterprises, and the careful balance of power that kept Chicago's underworld stable. We returned to the Lincoln Park house after 2 weeks at the lake, finding it immaculately restored, all evidence of that night's violence erased. The bullet holes in the walls had been patched, the bloodstains on the lawn removed, new security systems installed. If I hadn't lived through it, I might have believed it never happened. Victor kept his word. The peace with the Costellos held, though I sometimes caught glimpses of the cost in the tight set of Victor's jaw after certain meetings, in the hushed conversations with Dominic that stopped when I entered a room. He made compromises, concessions, territory surrendered, businesses shared, profit margins reduced, all to give Sophia a chance at something resembling a normal childhood. And he was present, truly present, in a way I hadn't expected. He adjusted his schedule to be home for dinner most nights, to help with Sophia's bedtime routine, to spend weekends with us rather than at Elysium or his other businesses. He installed a home office, conducting much of his work from the house, his presence a constant reassurance that we were protected, valued, loved, because love had crept back in, almost against my will. It was there in the gentle way he held Sophia during her nighttime feedings, in the pride that transformed his face when she first rolled from her back to her stomach, in the patience with which he built the complicated play gym that now dominated one corner of the family room. It was there in the small gestures, coffee waiting for me each morning, prepared exactly as I liked it, new books appearing on my nightstand, selections that showed he was paying attention to my interests. The way he began including me in decisions about the house, about our life together, no longer presuming to arrange everything without my input, and it was there in the nights, in the slow rekindling of physical intimacy between us. Victor was patient, never pushing, waiting for me to signal readiness. When I finally did, reaching for him in the darkness 3 months after that night at the lake house, he responded with a passion that had only grown sharper with waiting, with a tenderness that acknowledged all we had weathered together. Afterward, lying in his arms, I'd asked the question that had been circling in my mind for weeks. What are we, Victor? What is this between us? He'd been silent for a long moment, his fingers tracing patterns on my bare shoulder. What do you want us to be? Partners, I'd replied, surprising myself with the certainty in my voice. Equals, as much as we can be, given everything. His hand had stilled. Equals. Even knowing who I am? What I've done? I don't know everything you've done, I'd admitted. I probably never will. But I know who you are with me, with Sophia. That's the man I'm choosing to build a life with. He'd kissed me then, deep and searching, before pulling back to look into my eyes. Then we're partners, in everything. The reality of everything revealed itself gradually. Victor began including me in aspects of his life he'd previously kept separate, introducing me to business associates at carefully vetted social events, discussing legitimate ventures over dinner, occasionally asking my opinion on matters related to Elysium or the other restaurants he owned. He never involved me in the other side of his business. The gambling operations, the protection rackets, the money laundering. Those conversations happened behind closed doors, in his office with Dominic, or his consigliere, an aging Italian named Salvatore, who treated me with old-world courtesy, but clearly considered my presence in Victor's life a complication. I was grateful for the separation, for Victor's effort to shield me from the uglier aspects of his world. But I wasn't naive. I knew where the money came from that paid for Sophia's designer clothes, for the renovation of the garden into a child-friendly paradise, for the trust fund already established in her name. I knew that the peace Victor had brokered with Marco Costello was enforced not just by mutual benefit, but by the threat of violence, by the certainty that betrayal would be met with swift, merciless retribution. It was a compromise I learned to live with, a moral ambiguity I navigated day by day, weighing what Sophia gained against what we all lost in the bargain. On a crisp October morning, just as Sophia was approaching her 9th month, Victor surprised me with a question over breakfast. "Would you marry me, Emma?" I nearly choked on my coffee, setting the cup down with shaking hands. "What?" He looked calm, certain, watching me with those dark eyes that still made my heart race. "Marry me. Be my wife. Give Sophia my name officially." Where is this coming from? Victor reached across the table, taking my hand in his. "I've been thinking about it for months. Since that night at the lake house, if I'm honest. But I wanted to give you time, to be sure." "And you're sure? That this is what you want?" "I've never been more certain of anything," he replied, his voice solemn. "I want you by my side, Emma, legally, permanently. I want the world to know that you and Sophia are mine." There it was again, that possessiveness that both thrilled and troubled me. "We're not possessions, Victor." Poor choice of words, he conceded, squeezing my hand. "I want the world to know that we're a family, that we've chosen each other." I studied his face, searching for hidden motives, for the calculation that sometimes lurked behind his expressions. But I saw only openness, vulnerability even, a rare glimpse of the man beneath the carefully constructed armor. "If I say yes," I said slowly, "I have conditions." Something flickered in his eyes. Amusement, respect. "Of course you do. I want a prenuptial agreement that guarantees Sophia and I will be taken care of, no matter what happens between us." I took a deep breath. "I want us to move, not immediately, but eventually, away from Chicago, somewhere Sophia can grow up without all of this." I gestured vaguely, encompassing the security cameras, the armed men who still maintained a constant presence, the weight of Victor's empire. Victor's expression hardened slightly. "My business is here, Emma. My life is here. I'm not saying abandon everything," I clarified, "but maybe scale back, delegate, create something legitimate that could eventually become your primary focus." I leaned forward, holding his gaze. "For Sophia, for the future we both want for her." He was silent for a long moment, and I could almost see the calculations running behind his eyes. What he could surrender, what he could transform, what he would refuse to give up. "It would take time," he said finally. "Years, maybe, to disentangle from certain obligations, to build something that could sustain us without the other revenue streams." "I know," I replied. "I'm not asking for overnight change. I'm asking for direction, for commitment to a different future eventually." Victor studied me, his expression unreadable. Then, abruptly, he stood, leaving the room without a word. My heart sank, wondering if I'd pushed too far, asked for too much from a man who had already compromised more than I'd thought possible. He returned moments later, carrying a small velvet box, not going down on one knee. That wasn't Victor's style. He simply placed it on the table between us, opening it to reveal a ring that took my breath away. A large oval diamond, surrounded by smaller stones, set in platinum that caught the morning light filtering through the windows. "This was my mother's," he said quietly. "My father gave it to her the day they were married. It's been in a safe deposit box since she died." He met my eyes. "I want you to have it, as a symbol of my commitment to you, to Sophia, to the future you want for us. Even if that future looks different from what I imagined." I stared at the ring, at the man offering it, at the crossroads we stood at together. "You haven't answered about my conditions." A small smile touched his lips. "Yes to the prenup. Salvatore will hate it, but I don't care. Yes to planning for a future away from Chicago. Somewhere safe. Somewhere Sophia can grow up without security details and armored cars. Somewhere we can be—" He hesitated, searching for the right word. "Normal. Or as normal as we can be." I reached for the ring, allowing him to slide it onto my finger. It was heavy, ornate, a physical reminder of the weight of the legacy I was agreeing to share. "Yes," I said simply. "I'll marry you, Victor." His smile, rare, genuine, transforming his face, was worth every moment of doubt, of fear, of moral compromise. He pulled me to my feet, his arms encircling my waist, his lips finding mine in a kiss that promised everything: passion, protection, partnership. Sophia chose that moment to make her presence known, her babbling from the baby monitor on the counter interrupting our embrace. Victor laughed against my mouth, the sound warming me from within. "Perfect timing," he murmured. "Let's go tell our daughter the news." The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of plans and preparations. Victor wanted a lavish wedding, a statement to the city, to his world, that Emma Collins was officially under his protection as Emma Moretti. I pushed back, arguing for something smaller, more intimate. The bigger the wedding, the bigger the target, I pointed out one evening as we discussed venues. "Do you really want every one of your associates, your competitors, your enemies in one place, with our daughter present?" He conceded the point with a reluctant nod. "Small, then, but still elegant, still worthy of you." We compromised on a ceremony at Victor's lake house, limited to 30 guests, my few close friends, Victor's inner circle, a handful of business associates he couldn't afford to slight. Security would be tight but discreet. Sophia would be the flower girl, carried down the aisle by Diana, who had somehow transitioned from Victor's intimidating assistant to something resembling a friend over the months since Sophia's birth. As the wedding approached, I found myself reflecting on the strange journey that had brought me here. From struggling waitress to the soon-to-be wife of one of Chicago's most powerful men. From single mother to partner in a complex, dangerous, but undeniably loving family unit. The moral compromises I'd made, the justifications I'd constructed, the boundaries I still maintained. Was I doing the right thing? For myself? For Sophia? There were no easy answers. No clear moral high ground. Only the reality of our lives, the love that had grown between Victor and me despite everything, the future we were trying to build together. 2 weeks before the wedding, that future was threatened in a way I hadn't anticipated. I was in the nursery, folding Sophia's laundry while she napped, when I heard the front door open. Footsteps on the stairs, not Victor's familiar stride, but someone else's. Before I could react, Dominic appeared in the doorway, his expression grave. "Mrs. Moretti," he said, using the title he'd adopted since our engagement, despite my corrections. "You need to come downstairs, now. Bring Sophia." The urgency in his voice chilled me. "What's happening? Where's Victor?" "Downstairs," Dominic replied tersely. "Please, Emma. It's important." I gathered Sophia, still half asleep, and followed Dominic to the main floor. Victor stood in the living room, his back to me, speaking in low, intense Italian to Salvatore. He turned when he heard us enter, his face a mask I hadn't seen in months. Cold, hard, closed off. "What's going on?" I asked, clutching Sophia closer as she began to fuss, sensing the tension in the room. Victor's eyes met mine, then shifted to Salvatore. "Show her." The old man stepped forward, producing a manila envelope from his coat. "These were delivered to Elysium this morning," he explained, his accent thick with agitation. "Addressed to Victor." I shifted Sophia to one arm, taking the envelope with my free hand. Inside were photographs, grainy but clear enough. Me, leaving a cafe with Sophia and Elena 2 days ago. Me, walking in the park, pushing Sophia's stroller. Me, entering a baby boutique where I'd been shopping for christening gowns. I don't understand, I said, looking up at Victor in confusion. Someone's following me? Turn them over, he instructed, his voice flat. I did. On the back of each photo was a red X, drawn in what looked like marker, but might have been something else entirely. The message was clear, even to me. Marco, I whispered. The name a curse now. Victor nodded once, sharp, the pieces broken. He's sending a message. Fear, cold and familiar, spread through my chest. Why now? After all these months? Because of the wedding, Salvatore interjected. Because it makes you official. It elevates your status, and Sophia's, in our world. What do we do? I asked, looking to Victor, seeing the barely contained fury behind his controlled expression. You and Sophia leave. Now. Diana has packed what you'll need. Dominic will take you somewhere safe until I handle this. Handle it how? I demanded, though I already knew the answer. Victor's eyes hardened further. Don't ask questions you don't want the answers to, Emma. No, I said, surprising myself with the firmness in my voice. We've been through this before. Violence begets violence. There has to be another way. There isn't, Victor replied, his tone brooking no argument. Not this time. Not when he's threatening you, threatening our daughter. He stepped closer, his hand gentle on Sophia's head even as his voice remained cold. I let him live once, Emma. I won't make that mistake again. The Victor before me now was the one I'd glimpsed that night at Elysium. The one who had orchestrated the defense of our home against Marco's men. The one who had returned from that night at the lake house with blood on his hands and peace brokered through fear. This was the man Chicago's underworld feared. The son who had avenged his father's murder. The leader who protected his territory at any cost. But he was also the man who read bedtime stories to Sophia with different voices for each character. The man who had learned to change diapers with meticulous care. The man who held me at night as if I were something precious, irreplaceable. The man I had agreed to marry, for better or worse. If you do this, I said carefully, if you kill Marco, the cycle never ends. His people will seek revenge. Someone else will rise to take his place. We'll never be free of this. You don't understand how this works, Victor replied, frustration edging into his voice. Mercy is seen as weakness. Weakness invites challenge. Challenge threatens everything. You, Sophia, our future. Then we leave, I suggested desperately. Now, today. We take Sophia and go somewhere they can't find us. Victor shook his head. And live in hiding? Always looking over our shoulders? That's not the life I want for you. For Sophia. And this is better? Another war? More bloodshed? He caught my free hand, the one with his mother's ring glinting in the afternoon light. Trust me, Emma. I will end this, permanently. And then we can move forward with the life we planned. The wedding. The future away from all this. I searched his face, looking for reassurance, for certainty. Promise me you'll be careful. Promise me you'll come back to us. Something softened in his expression. Always, he murmured, leaning forward to press a kiss to my forehead, to Sophia's. Now go with Dominic. Diana will meet you there. I'll contact you when it's safe. Where are you taking us? I asked Dominic as he ushered us toward the back of the house, where a car was already waiting. Better you don't know specifics, he replied, checking his weapon as we walked. For your safety. For the boss's peace of mind. The car was not one of Victor's usual vehicles. Nondescript, American-made, nothing that would draw attention. Sophia's car seat had already been installed in the back. As Dominic secured her, I turned for one last look at the house, at Victor standing in the doorway, his expression unreadable from this distance. I love you, I called, the words inadequate for all I wanted to say. He nodded once, a gesture I had learned to read as emotional rather than dismissive. Then he turned away, already on his phone, already shifting into the version of himself I had glimpsed, but never truly known. Dominic drove for hours, taking a circuitous route that I quickly lost track of. Sophia alternated between sleeping and fussing, uncomfortable with the long journey, sensing my anxiety. We stopped only once, at a gas station where Dominic switched vehicles. Another nondescript sedan, this one with tinted windows and different plates. Night had fallen by the time we reached our destination, a cabin in what appeared to be dense woods, far from any major road. Despite its remote location, the cabin was equipped with modern security, cameras, motion sensors, reinforced doors and windows. "Diana will be here within the hour," Dominic explained as he carried our bags inside. "There's food in the kitchen, a crib set up in the bedroom. The panic room is behind the bookshelf in the main room. Code is Sophia's birthday. Use it if you hear the alarm, or if anyone approaches who isn't me or Diana." The clinical way he delivered these instructions made the reality of our situation hit home. We weren't on a surprise vacation. We were in hiding, because someone wanted us dead to hurt Victor. Because the life I had chosen, the man I had chosen, came with consequences I couldn't escape. "How long will we be here?" I asked, settling Sophia on a blanket on the living room floor. Dominic's expression gave away nothing. "As long as necessary. The boss will contact you when it's safe." After he left, I explored the cabin. 2 bedrooms, a bathroom, an open-plan kitchen and living area. Everything we might need had been provided: clothes for Sophia and me, toys, books, food, medical supplies. Even my laptop had somehow been packed, though I suspected it would have no internet connection here. Diana arrived as promised, bringing additional supplies and a burner phone. "For emergencies only," she explained, showing me the single number programmed into it. "It connects to Victor's private line. Use it if something happens that Dominic or I can't handle." "Have you heard from him?" I asked, trying to keep the desperation from my voice. She hesitated, then nodded. "Briefly, things are proceeding." I didn't ask for clarification, didn't want to know what proceeding meant in this context. Instead, I focused on Sophia, on maintaining some semblance of her routine in this strange place, on keeping my own fears at bay for her sake. Days passed in a haze of worry and monotony. Diana stayed with us, working remotely on her laptop, maintaining Victor's legitimate business affairs as if nothing was amiss. Dominic came and went, bringing supplies, checking security, never offering information about what was happening in Chicago unless directly asked, and even then providing only the barest details. "The boss is handling it," he would say. "He's safe. That's what matters." A week into our exile, as I was putting Sophia to bed in the small room that had been set up as a nursery, I heard the distinctive sound of a helicopter approaching. Diana appeared in the doorway, her expression for once betraying emotion. "Relief. It's him," she said simply. I finished tucking Sophia in, heart hammering in my chest, and rushed to the main room. Through the window, I could see the helicopter landing in the clearing beside the cabin, its searchlight briefly illuminating the trees before going dark. A figure emerged, tall, broad-shouldered, moving with the confident stride I would recognize anywhere. Victor. I met him at the door, thrown by the contrast between his immaculate appearance, another perfectly tailored suit, not a hair out of place, and the rustic setting of the cabin. Before I could speak, he pulled me into his arms, holding me with a desperation that told me more than words could have about the week we'd spent apart. "It's over," he said against my hair, his voice rough with exhaustion. Marco Costello was no longer a threat. I pulled back to look at his face, searching for signs of what over entailed. There were no visible injuries, no blood, nothing to indicate physical confrontation. Just a weariness around his eyes that spoke of sleepless nights, of difficult decisions. "Did you—" I couldn't finish the question. Victor's expression hardened slightly. "I did what was necessary to protect my family. That's all you need to know." I nodded, accepting the boundary he was drawing. Some things I didn't want to know, couldn't know if we were to move forward together. "Sophia?" he asked, glancing toward the bedrooms. "Asleep," I replied. "She's been asking for you, in her way." A small smile touched his lips. "I've missed her. Missed you both." He followed me to the nursery, standing in the doorway, watching Sophia sleep with an expression of such naked love it made my throat tight. This was the contradiction of Victor Moretti. capable of violence I couldn't comprehend. Yet so gentle with his daughter it sometimes brought tears to my eyes. Later, after Diana and Dominic had tactfully withdrawn to the guest cabin, after Victor had showered and changed into the casual clothes someone had thoughtfully packed for him, we sat on the cabin's small porch. The night was cool, but not cold, the stars brilliant overhead, the silence broken only by the rustle of leaves in the light breeze. "When can we go home?" I asked, leaning against his side, drawing comfort from his solid presence. "Tomorrow," he replied. "Everything is settled in Chicago." He turned to look at me, his expression serious in the dim light. "But I've been thinking about what you said, about leaving. Starting fresh somewhere else." My heart skipped a beat. "You have?" Victor nodded slowly. "This past week. It made things clear. I don't want this life for Sophia. For you, the constant threats, the security details, the safe rooms." He sighed, running a hand through his still damp hair. "I've spoken to Salvatore about transitioning the businesses. The legitimate ones can be managed remotely. The others..." He hesitated. "It will take time. A year, maybe 2, but it can be done." "Where would we go?" I asked, hardly daring to believe what I was hearing. "I have property in California, Napa Valley. Vineyards, a house overlooking the valley. Remote but not isolated, beautiful." His arm tightened around me. Sophia could grow up there, away from Chicago, from my father's legacy, from the Costellos and everyone like them. The image was seductive. Sophia running through vineyards, growing up with sunshine and open spaces instead of security cameras and armored cars. Victor and I building something new together, something untainted by blood and fear. "What about the wedding?" I asked, practical concerns intruding on the dream. "We'll have it here," Victor decided. "This weekend. Just us, Sophia, Dominic and Diana as witnesses. Salvatore can perform the ceremony. He has the authority." His hand found mine, fingers entwining. No announcements, no guests, nothing that could draw attention or create another target. Just our family, making promises we intend to keep. It wasn't the wedding I had imagined, even with our scaled-back plans. But as I looked at Victor in the starlight, at the man who had remade himself for us, who had ended a blood feud, and was preparing to walk away from an empire for the chance at a different future, I couldn't imagine anything more perfect. "Yes," I said simply, "let's do it." His smile, genuine, unguarded, transformed his face, erasing the weariness, the hardness, revealing the man beneath the armor he had worn for so long, the man I had fallen in love with, despite everything. "Tomorrow we go home," he said, pressing a kiss to my temple. "We make arrangements, and then we begin our future, Mrs. Moretti." As we sat together under the vast canopy of stars, I allowed myself to believe in that future, in a life away from Chicago, away from the violence and fear that had defined our relationship from the beginning. A life where Sophia could grow up safely, where Victor could be the man he wanted to be rather than the man his father's legacy had shaped him into, where I could be both partner and protector, helping him navigate the transition from one world to another. It wouldn't be easy. Nothing with Victor ever was. But as his arm tightened around me, as the night wrapped us in its peaceful embrace, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months. Hope. Pure, uncomplicated hope for the life we were choosing, for the family we were building, for the love that had somehow flourished in the most unlikely soil. "I love you," I whispered, the words still new enough to carry weight, to matter. "And I love you," Victor replied, his voice rough with emotion, more than I thought possible, enough to change, enough to leave everything behind for a chance at something better, with you, with Sophia. In that moment, under the stars, miles from Chicago and the world that had brought us together, I believed him, believed in us. In the future we were choosing, against all odds, together. The wedding was everything a ceremony in a remote cabin in the woods could be. Simple, intimate, unexpectedly perfect. Diana had worked miracles with local flowers and candles, transforming the rustic living room into something elegant and warm. Sophia, dressed in a tiny white dress Victor had somehow arranged to have delivered, babbled happily in Diana's arms as Salvatore performed the ceremony in his gravelly, accented English. I wore a cream-colored silk dress that Diana had produced from one of the suitcases. Not a traditional wedding gown, but beautiful nonetheless, falling in simple lines to just below my knees. Victor wore a dark suit, crisp white shirt, no tie, more relaxed than I was used to seeing him, but no less commanding, no less breathtaking. Our vows were traditional but heartfelt, the weight of all we had survived together, all we hoped to build, lending depth to the familiar words. When Victor slipped the simple platinum band he had selected to accompany his mother's engagement ring onto my finger, his hands were steady, but his eyes betrayed his emotion. Dark, intense, filled with a promise that went beyond the words we had just spoken. "I now pronounce you husband and wife," Salvatore declared, a rare smile softening his weathered face. "You may kiss your bride, Victor." Victor's kiss was gentle but possessive, a perfect encapsulation of the man himself. When we separated, his hand lingering on my cheek, I saw something in his expression I had rarely glimpsed before: peace. We celebrated with champagne and an elaborate dinner prepared by a chef who had been flown in for the occasion, then discreetly removed before we gathered for the ceremony. Sophia was passed from arms to arms. Even Dominic, normally so stoic, smiling as she grabbed at his tie with determined fingers. As the evening progressed, the small group that constituted our strange family relaxed. Stories were shared. Laughter echoed in the cabin that had been a place of hiding just days before. Later, after Sophia had been put to bed and our guests had withdrawn to give us privacy, Victor and I stood on the porch again, champagne glasses in hand, the night wrapping around us like a familiar blanket. "Mrs. Moretti," he murmured, his free arm sliding around my waist, pulling me against his side. "How does it feel?" I leaned into him, savoring his warmth, his strength, the sense of safety I had come to associate with his presence despite, or perhaps because of, the dangers we had faced together. "Right," I replied simply. "It feels right." His smile, still rare enough to quicken my pulse, flashed in the darkness. "I have something for you, a wedding gift." From his pocket he produced an envelope, pressing it into my hand. Inside was a photograph, a sprawling Mediterranean-style villa nestled among vineyards, mountains rising purple and majestic in the background, the California sun casting everything in golden light. "Our new home," Victor explained, his voice soft but certain. "I made the arrangements while I was in Chicago. The transfer of ownership is complete. The renovations will be finished in 3 months." I stared at the photograph, at the tangible evidence of Victor's commitment to our new future. "It's beautiful," I whispered, emotion making my voice catch. "Sophia will love growing up there." "We'll be happy there," he said, not a question but a promise. "All of us." I turned in his arms, reaching up to touch his face, tracing the strong line of his jaw. "What about your businesses? Chicago? Everything you built?" A shadow crossed his features, quickly controlled. "I've put things in motion. Salvatore will oversee the transition. The legitimate enterprises, the restaurants, the real estate holdings, the import business, those stay with us, managed remotely. The rest..." He hesitated, choosing his words carefully. "The rest will be distributed or dissolved, gradually, strategically. No power vacuums that could lead to war. No loose ends that could follow us." "How long?" I asked, understanding the complexity of what he was describing, the danger inherent in dismantling an empire built over generations. "A year. Maybe 18 months. His hand covered mine where it rested against his cheek. "We'll divide our time between Chicago and California at first. As things progress, we'll spend more time in Napa, less in the city. By Sophia's 2nd birthday, it will be done. We'll be free." The word hung between us. Free. Free from the constant threat of violence. Free from the legacy that had shaped Victor's life from childhood. Free to build something new, something untainted by blood and fear. "And you're sure?" I pressed, needing to know that this wasn't a decision made in the heat of the moment, in the aftermath of the confrontation with Marco Costello. "You're sure you can walk away from everything you've built? Everything your father built?" Victor was silent for a long moment, his expression thoughtful, his dark eyes reflecting the stars above. "My father built an empire based on fear," he said finally. on control, on violence when necessary. He taught me to do the same, to value power above all else, to trust no one completely. His arm tightened around me, but he never had this, never knew what it was to love someone more than power, more than legacy, more than life itself. He turned to face me fully, his hands framing my face with gentle intensity. I choose you, Emma, you and Sophia. I choose the man I can be with you over the man my father wanted me to be. I choose a future where our daughter grows up safe, happy, innocent of the things I've done. The raw honesty in his voice, in his eyes, moved me beyond words. This was Victor stripped of his armor, of the careful control he maintained in all things. This was the man I had glimpsed in rare, unguarded moments, the man I had fallen in love with despite everything that should have kept us apart. I choose you too, I whispered, rising on tiptoes to press my lips to his. All of you. The good and the bad, the past and the future, everything you are, everything you're trying to become. He kissed me then, deep and desperate, as if sealing the promises we had made. Not just the formal vows of the ceremony, but these more personal pledges, these commitments to a future neither of us had imagined possible when I'd made that fateful call from the hospital 9 months ago. The transition began as soon as we returned to Chicago, though to the outside world, nothing appeared to have changed. Victor still managed his businesses, still commanded the respect and fear of the city's underworld. I still cared for Sophia, still maintained the appearance of the protected, privileged wife of a powerful man, but behind the scenes, changes were happening. Properties were sold. Interests in certain businesses were quietly transferred to trusted lieutenants. Arrangements were made with former rivals, with allies, with the network of connections Victor had built over years of careful strategy. We made our first trip to the Napa property a month after the wedding, flying in Victor's private jet with Sophia, who had recently begun pulling herself up on furniture, eager to explore the world from a new perspective. The house was even more beautiful than the photograph had suggested. 5 bedrooms, sweeping views of the valley, a pool shimmering in the California sunshine, vineyards stretching to the horizon in neat, orderly rows. The previous owner was a retired tech executive, Victor explained as he carried Sophia through the grand entrance hall, pointing out features to her as if she could understand. The wine production is small but excellent, primarily Cabernet and Merlot. The staff has been vetted, of course. Of course. Even here, 3,000 miles from Chicago, Victor's caution, his need for control and security, remained. But it was muted, less oppressive than in the city. The security systems were state-of-the-art but discreet. The men who patrolled the property kept their distance, blending into the landscape rather than hovering at every entrance. We spent 2 weeks there, settling into the rhythms of this new place, this new potential life. Victor worked remotely, his phone calls and video conferences confined to a few hours each morning. The rest of the time, he was with us, swimming with Sophia in the heated pool, walking with me through the vineyards as the sun set behind the mountains, making love in our new bedroom with the windows open to catch the fragrant night breeze. I watched him change subtly during those 2 weeks, his shoulders relaxing, the permanent furrow between his brows softening, his rare smiles becoming more frequent. One afternoon, I found him asleep on a lounge chair by the pool, Sophia napping on his chest, both of them bathed in golden sunlight. The sight brought tears to my eyes. This man who had lived his entire life on high alert, finally able to rest, to trust, to find peace. This could really work, couldn't it? I asked that night, as we sat on the terrace, drinking wine from the estate's own vineyards, Sophia asleep in the nursery that had been prepared for her. This new life, this fresh start. Victor's eyes, reflecting the sunset, held a cautious hope I had never seen before. Yes, he said simply. It could, it will. We returned to Chicago reluctantly, the winter chill a shock after California's warmth. But there was work to be done, arrangements to be made, a life to be dismantled carefully, strategically, without creating the power vacuum that could lead to the very violence we were trying to escape. Months passed in a careful dance between two worlds. The Chicago empire Victor was gradually releasing his grip on, and the California haven we were preparing to embrace fully. Sophia took her first steps in the Lincoln Park house, celebrated her first birthday with a small gathering of the people who had become our unusual family. Victor continued to manage his transition, spending long hours in meetings with Salvatore, with trusted associates, with legitimate business managers who would oversee the restaurants and real estate holdings from Chicago, once we had permanently relocated. There were setbacks, of course. A faction of the Costello organization, unsatisfied with the arrangements made after Marco's removal, tested the boundaries of the new order. Victor was forced to respond, to demonstrate that his reach, his power, remained undiminished, despite his gradual withdrawal from certain activities. I didn't ask for details when he returned home late those nights, his expression hard, the weight of his world visible in the set of his shoulders. I simply held him, reminding him without words of why we were doing this, of what waited for us on the other side of this complex transition. And there were moments of doubt, nights when I lay awake, wondering if we were fooling ourselves, if a man like Victor could ever truly walk away from the world he had been born into, if the violence that had shaped his life would follow us no matter how far we ran. But there were also moments of such perfect happiness that they eclipsed all doubt. Sophia's delight in discovering a butterfly in the garden, Victor teaching her to say Papa, his expression of wonder when she finally managed it. Quiet evenings as a family, building a life together day by day, choice by choice. Spring came, then summer. We spent more time in California, less in Chicago. The house in Napa became home in our conversations, the Lincoln Park mansion increasingly referred to as the Chicago house. Sophia thrived in the sunshine, in the open spaces, in the normalcy we were gradually building for her. Victor's empire continued its controlled dismantling. Territories were ceded to carefully selected successors. Arrangements were solidified with former rivals. The legitimate businesses were restructured for remote management, with trusted employees elevated to positions of greater responsibility. And then, on a crisp October day, exactly 1 year after our wedding in the cabin, Victor called me from his office downtown. "It's done," he said simply, his voice carrying a mixture of relief and something that might have been grief. The final arrangements, the last transfers of influence. I sat down, the weight of his words settling over me. "Completely as it can ever be," he replied, honesty tempering the moment of triumph. "There will always be connections, always be people who remember, but the active involvement, the day-to-day operations, the direct control, that's over." When can we leave?" I asked, already mentally packing, already imagining our life in California becoming permanent rather than transitional. "Tomorrow," Victor said, and I could hear the smile in his voice, could picture his expression, that rare, unguarded look that transformed his features. "The jet is being prepared. We'll fly out in the morning." "Just like that?" "No. I don't know. Farewell dinner with Salvatore? No final meetings? All done," he assured me. Over the past week, this was just the final signature, the last transfer of assets. There was a pause then, more softly. "I'm coming home, Emma. To you. To Sophia. To pack for our new life." The next morning dawned clear and cold, Chicago's skyline crisp against the autumn sky. We moved through the house, our home for the past year and a half, selecting last-minute items for the move, though most of our belongings had already been shipped to California weeks before. Sophia toddled from room to room, chattering in her mixture of English and Italian, occasionally stopping to peer out windows as if saying goodbye to the only home she had really known. Victor was different that morning, lighter somehow, as if a weight had been physically lifted from his shoulders. He played with Sophia, swinging her into the air to make her laugh, her dark curls, so like his, bouncing with each movement. He pulled me close whenever I passed, stealing kisses, his hands lingering on my waist. My face, as if reassuring himself that we were real, that this new beginning was truly happening. The convoy of cars that had been such a fixture of our life in Chicago was reduced to 2, one for us, one for Dominic and Elena, the only members of the security team who would be accompanying us to California permanently. The others stood in the driveway, a silent honor guard as we prepared to depart. Salvatore was there as well, his weathered face impassive, but his eyes suspiciously bright as he bent to kiss Sophia's cheek, as he embraced me with a warmth that had developed slowly over months of cautious interaction. "Take care of him," he murmured in my ear. "This is not easy what he does, walking away from everything." I know, I whispered back. I will. He turned to Victor then, these two men who had navigated a dangerous world together for years. No words were spoken, just a long look, an embrace that spoke of a bond deeper than business, than obligation. When they separated, Salvatore pressed something into Victor's hand. A pocket watch, I realized, antique and gleaming in the morning sunlight. Your father's, the old man explained gruffly. He would be proud, Victor, not of what you're leaving behind, perhaps, but of why, of who you've become. Victor's expression tightened, emotion briefly visible before he controlled it. He nodded once, tucking the watch carefully into his coat pocket. Thank you, old friend, he said simply, for everything. Goodbyes completed, we settled into the car, Sophia secure in her car seat, babbling happily to the stuffed lion that had become her constant companion, Victor and I on either side of her, our hands linked across the back of her seat. As we pulled away from the house, as Chicago's familiar streets gave way to the highway leading to the private airfield where the jet waited, I studied Victor's profile, the strong jaw, the straight nose, the dark eyes that had once seemed so impenetrable, but now revealed so much to me. Any regrets? I asked softly, not wanting to disrupt Sophia's contented playing, but needing to know, to be certain that this choice, this enormous, life-altering choice, was one he made freely, completely. Victor turned to me, his expression thoughtful. About leaving this behind, he gestured vaguely, encompassing not just the city receding behind us, but all it represented. The power, the wealth built on fear, the legacy he had inherited and expanded. No regrets. He squeezed my hand, his gaze shifting to Sophia, to the miracle that had brought us together, that had changed everything, but gratitude. For you. For her. For the chance to be something different than what I was made to be. The jet waited on the tarmac, sleek and white against the clear blue sky. As we boarded, the three of us, then Dominic and Elena, the minimal crew necessary for this final journey from our old life to our new one, I felt a sense of completion, of a circle closing. 9 months ago, I had made a desperate call from a hospital room, reaching for a man I barely knew, a man who had disappeared from my life, leaving me alone and pregnant and afraid. That call had set in motion everything that followed, the danger, the protection, the gradual building of trust, of love, of a family unlike any I could have imagined for myself. Now we were flying toward a future built on choice rather than circumstance, on love rather than obligation, on the belief that even the most unlikely beginnings could lead to something beautiful, something lasting. As the jet lifted into the sky, as Chicago fell away beneath us, Victor pulled me close, his arm secure around my shoulders, Sophia dozing against his chest. We're going home, he murmured, pressing a kiss to my temple. Home. Not a place, not really, but us, together, Victor, Emma, Sophia. A family forged in extraordinary circumstances, tested by danger and doubt, strengthened by choice and commitment. An unlikely love story with the most perfect ending I could imagine. Not an ending at all, but a beginning. A new chapter in a life we were writing together, page by page, day by day. The California sun welcomed us 6 hours later, golden and warm even in October. As we descended the steps from the jet, Sophia in my arms, Victor beside me, the vineyard stretching before us like a promise, I knew with absolute certainty that we had made the right choice, that the man beside me, complicated, dangerous, loving, transformed, was the man I was meant to build a life with, against all odds, against all reason. Welcome home, Mrs. Moretti, Victor said softly, his arm sliding around my waist as we walked toward the waiting car, toward our future. Home, I agreed, leaning into his strength, his warmth, his love, finally. And as Sophia babbled happily between us, as the California sunshine bathed us in its golden light, as the weight of Chicago and all it represented fell away mile by mile, I knew that this was just the beginning. That the story of Victor, Emma, and Sophia Moretti, unlikely, imperfect, beautiful, was just beginning to unfold in ways none of us could have predicted that night in the hospital when a desperate call changed everything. Not an ending, but a beginning. Not perfect, but ours. And in that moment, with my husband's arm around me and my daughter's weight against my chest, it was everything I had never dared to hope for, and more than I had ever dreamed possible. 6 months later, as spring bloomed across the vineyards, I stood on the terrace of our California home, watching Victor push Sophia on the swing he had installed beneath an ancient oak tree. Her laughter floated up to me on the warm breeze, along with Victor's deeper voice as he spoke to her in the mixture of English and Italian that had become their special language. The man below bore little resemblance to the Victor Moretti, who had entered my hospital room that night nearly 2 years ago. His expensive suits had given way to casual clothes, jeans, button-down shirts with the sleeves rolled up, occasionally even t-shirts on the warmest days. The constant vigilance that had characterized his movements in Chicago had softened into a more relaxed awareness. The hardness that had once seemed permanent in his expression had mellowed, emerging only rarely when business from his former life required attention. He was still Victor, still commanding, still intense, still possessive of what he considered his. But he was also more. Softer with Sophia, more open with me, more willing to show vulnerability, to admit doubt, to share the burdens he had once carried alone. The vineyards were thriving under his careful management, the wine production expanding but still boutique, still focused on quality over quantity. The legitimate businesses in Chicago operated smoothly under the leadership he had installed, requiring only occasional video conferences, rare trips back to the city he had once ruled. Our life had settled into rhythms I had never imagined possible. Family breakfasts on the terrace, walks through the vineyards with Sophia naming everything she saw in her growing vocabulary, quiet evenings by the fire with Victor reading reports while I worked on the children's book I had begun writing, inspired by our daughter's delight in stories. There were still security measures. Dominic and Elena remained constant presences. The property's perimeter was still monitored. Background checks were still conducted on everyone who entered our orbit. Some habits, some necessities, couldn't be abandoned entirely. Wouldn't be for years to come, if ever. But they had receded into the background of our lives, no longer the defining feature of our existence. We were, against all odds, normal. A family building a life together, day by day, choice by choice. As I watched, Victor lifted Sophia from the swing, spinning her around until her giggles reached a crescendo, then setting her gently on her feet. She immediately began to toddle toward the flower bed I had planted, Victor following closely, crouching beside her to explain something about the blooms that captured her attention. The sight filled me with a contentment so complete it brought tears to my eyes. This was what I had hoped for when I'd asked Victor to leave Chicago, to build something new with me. This was the future I had barely dared to imagine was possible. Victor looked up, catching sight of me on the terrace. His smile, once so rare, now a daily gift, transformed his face as he lifted a hand in greeting. Sophia followed his gaze, her own face lighting up as she spotted me. "Mama!" she called, waving with the exuberance only a toddler can muster. "Mama, come see." I made my way down to them, to my family, to the life we had built from the most unlikely beginning. Victor's arm slid around my waist as I reached them, his lips brushing my temple in the casual affection that had become our norm. "Happy?" he asked softly, the question simple but weighted with all we had overcome to reach this moment. I looked up at him, at the man who had remade himself for love, who had walked away from an empire for the chance at something better, who had become the husband and father I had once thought impossible when I'd glimpsed the darkness in him that night at Elysium. "Yes," I replied, the word inadequate for the fullness in my heart, for the life we had created together. More than I ever thought possible. His smile deepened, his dark eyes, once so unreadable to me, now open, revealing all he felt, all he had become. "Me too," he admitted, the simple phrase carrying the weight of transformation, of choices made and remade, of a love that had overcome every obstacle placed in its path. Sophia tugged at my hand, eager to show me the flower that had captured her attention. As I crouched beside her, as Victor knelt on her other side, as our daughter's voice filled the spring air with her excitement over this small discovery, I knew with absolute certainty that the call I had made that night from the hospital, desperate, afraid, reaching for help from the most unlikely source, had been the best decision of my life, not because it had been easy, not because it had been safe, but because it had led us here, to this moment, to this life, to this love that had transformed us both, that had given Sophia the family she deserved, that had created something beautiful from the most chaotic beginning. As Victor's eyes met mine over our daughter's dark curls, as his hand found mine where it rested on Sophia's small shoulder, I saw in his gaze the same certainty, the same wonder at where we had ended up, at what we had become together. Not an ending, but the most perfect beginning. A love story unlike any other. Dangerous, complicated, transformative. Ours.